The pup wrote, "God, help my mom, she cries every night." The Alpha King found the letter and came. The wind whispered through the village, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and cold stone. The small houses leaned into one another, as if seeking comfort from the same shadows that draped the streets like a heavy cloak. In one such house, a child sat on the edge of a wooden stool, a worn quill clutched tightly in her small hands. Her paper was crooked, ink smudged, and her heart was heavy. "God," she whispered, her voice trembling, "please help my mom. She cries every night." The words were simple, innocent, but they carried a weight far greater than the child herself. Her mother's soft sobs had haunted her for years, filling the night with a quiet despair that no lullaby could soothe. Tonight, the child had decided she could do nothing else but write. She sealed the letter with trembling hands, her small fingers pressing hard against the wax, leaving the faint impression of her tiny palm. She did not know who would find it. Perhaps no one. Perhaps some unseen force that listened to the purest cries of the heart. She tucked the letter into her satchel and, shivering, stepped out into the misted streets. The village was silent. Windows glimmered faintly with candlelight, and the smell of cooking fires lingered in the air. She walked toward the path that led to the forest, where shadows twisted between the trees like living things. The letter, she thought, must reach someone powerful, someone who could help. Far above the village, on a high balcony of stone spires, a figure watched. Cloaked in darkness, with eyes that shone like amber in the moonlight, the Alpha King surveyed his lands. He was a man of legend, feared and respected. His name was whispered in the villages like a warning, yet the villagers knew little of the man himself, only the stories of his power and the chill of his gaze. But tonight, something stirred in him that he had not felt for decades. He noticed the small figure moving through the mist, and something compelled him to descend, to follow the path of faint light and innocence. The child did not notice him, of course. She crept carefully, placing the letter in the hollow of an ancient oak tree, hidden just enough to be discovered by a wandering traveler, or so she hoped. The king reached the edge of the forest, silent as a shadow. He bent down, observing the small hand leaving the letter behind. Her innocence struck a chord deep within him, something that had long been buried beneath crowns, curses, and endless solitude. "Why?" he whispered to himself, his voice low but carrying through the quiet night. He did not know why he felt the pull so strongly, but he did not resist. He collected the letter gently, his fingers brushing over the small, trembling marks of the child's hand. The letter smelled faintly of ink and candle smoke. He read the words again. "God, help my mom. She cries every night." The simplicity of it, the honesty, made his chest tighten. He had spent years ruling as a king, a leader of men and beasts, but he had never encountered a cry like this. Never one so pure, never one so human. For a long moment he stood still. Then, without a word, he turned back toward the village. Dawn would not yet come, but he knew he could not wait. Something inside him demanded action, even though he did not fully understand why. In the small house, the mother sat by the fire, her hands trembling as she tried to scrub away the fatigue that marked her face. She had been weeping quietly, hiding it from the world, as her daughter had slept in the corner. The child returned home silently, tucking herself beneath the thin blanket. She felt a small flutter in her chest, a hope she could not explain. She had done what she could. Now she could only wait. Outside, the mist thickened, and the Alpha King moved like a phantom. He reached the village unnoticed, his presence a shadow among shadows. The villagers, still wrapped in their sleep or busy with early chores, did not see him approach. Only the wind carried the faint sound of hooves, soft but deliberate. He paused in front of the small house where the mother and child lived. The air seemed to thrum around him, as though the forest itself acknowledged his presence. He could feel the sorrow, the quiet suffering, and the love that clung to it. The door creaked as he entered. No one noticed him at first. He moved like the air, gentle and yet undeniable. He knelt beside the fire, his presence warm but strange, as if both the shadows and the light were drawn to him. The child awoke, startled. She had never seen anyone like him, tall, strong, cloaked in darkness, yet with eyes that seemed to hold more sadness than anger. "Who are you?" she whispered, clutching her blanket. "I am," he began, but paused, realizing no name could matter here. "I am someone who heard your words," he said simply. "Your letter, it reached me." The child's eyes widened. You read it," he nodded. "Yes, and I will help. But first I need to know everything." His voice was calm, but carried the weight of mountains, storms, and centuries of loneliness. The mother stirred, drawn by the low, commanding voice. She had expected strangers, thieves, perhaps officials coming to demand payment or levy taxes. But this figure was different. Her breath caught as he looked at her, not with judgment but with understanding. The king's gaze softened as he observed the pain etched into her face. She had suffered quietly, as so many did in his kingdom, yet here, in the small warmth of her home, her suffering was visible, real, and human. I don't know how," she stammered. "I don't know how we will survive." "You will not have to face it alone," he said. "I will see that you are safe." The child tilted her head, curiosity mingled with fear. "You can do that?" The king's eyes darkened with the memory of his power, the vast and terrible force he wielded as Alpha of the kingdom. "I can," he said. "But it is not enough to simply act. You must trust me even if you are afraid." The child nodded slowly. She had seen fear in many forms, shadowed forests, angry villagers, even in the eyes of grown men. But something about him felt different. Something about his presence whispered that he was not like the rest of the world. I trust you," she said softly. The king's heart, long sealed under centuries of duty and darkness, trembled at the words. They were so simple, yet so profound. A child's trust, a thing he had never known, had pierced the walls he had built around himself. Outside, the first hints of dawn began to streak the sky, painting the village in shades of silver and gold. But the air was tense, as though the world itself held its breath. The Alpha King knew danger would come, for his enemies were many, and the innocence of this child had already begun to ripple across the shadows like a stone cast into water. He stood, towering over the small room, and looked down at the child. "You have asked for help," he said, his voice low but resolute, "and it will be given. But you must understand, help comes with a cost. There are those who will seek to take what is precious to you if they know it exists." The child shivered but nodded. "I understand," she said, her small voice brave in the face of shadows she could not yet see. The king's eyes softened, yet a shadow of doubt lingered in them. He did not yet know if he could protect them fully, or if his presence would draw darkness instead of warding it away. As he prepared to leave, he turned back one last time. "Stay here," he commanded gently. "Do not wander, I will return, and when I do, things will change." The child watched him step into the mist, his figure blending with the forest as though he had never been there. But the warmth of hope remained, flickering like a candle against the encroaching darkness. And somewhere deep within the forest, unseen by all, the Alpha King paused. His mind was a storm of duty, power, and an unfamiliar longing. The letter had reached him, and now he was drawn into a web of fate he could not escape. A shadow shifted in the distance, and a voice, old and menacing, whispered through the trees. "He has found her, and the game begins." The Alpha King's hand tightened around the letter. His eyes glowed amber in the dim light. He did not flinch, did not hesitate. For the first time in decades, something human called to him more strongly than duty or fear. And so, as dawn broke over the village, a quiet promise lingered in the air, that the cries of one child could awaken even the coldest of hearts, and that the world of shadows and curses would never be the same again. The mist hung low over the village as dawn painted the sky in soft strokes of gold and silver. The streets were empty, except for the sound of a distant river and the occasional crow perched on a crooked roof. Yet, for all the quiet, something had changed. A presence unlike any other moved through the village, silent as the morning fog. The Alpha King had come. His figure was imposing, cloaked in darkness that seemed to drink the light around him, yet his steps were careful, measured, almost reverent. He moved toward the small house where the child and her mother lived. The letter still rested in his hand, its words echoing in his mind. God, help my mom. She cries every night. The villagers did not stir. They had learned long ago that the king's presence was both feared and respected. No one dared to approach. Whispers, if they came at all, were careful, half hidden in the morning breeze. The king stopped at the edge of the house, his amber eyes scanning the surroundings. He could feel the quiet suffering within, the weight of worry that pressed down on the mother, the small flicker of hope that clung to the child. He had seen suffering many times, but this was different. This was human, raw, and unshielded. Inside, the child stirred under her thin blanket. The memory of the stranger from last night, the figure who had seemed to appear from shadows, haunted her dreams. Her small fingers clutched the blanket and she whispered to herself, He is coming back, isn't he? Before she could finish the thought, a shadow fell across the room. She froze. The king was there, kneeling at the threshold, calm but undeniable. I have returned, he said softly, his voice carrying a weight of authority and compassion that seemed impossible to separate. I want to understand everything. The child's eyes widened. She had never imagined he would come again. Her small voice trembled. You really read my letter, he nodded. I did, and I intend to help, but first you must tell me your story. The mother appeared behind the child, her hair in disarray, her face pale but alert, fear mixed with curiosity. Who are you? She asked, though she already knew from the stories that had haunted her nights. The King of Shadows, ruler of the castle high above, feared by all. I am someone who heard your heart, he replied, a faint edge of sadness in his tone, and I have come to see that your suffering ends. The mother swallowed hard, unsure if she should believe him. Yet the intensity of his gaze, the calm strength in his presence, left her no room for false hope. There was truth in him, something real. The child spoke again, stepping forward, her innocence unguarded. My mom, she cries every night. She is tired. And I don't know how to make it stop. The king's heart tightened. He had ruled over lands filled with strife, seen countless lives torn apart by war and magic, yet nothing had moved him like this small, fragile voice. He knelt, coming closer to their level, and spoke quietly. You have done something very brave. You reached out when no one else could, and that courage, it has reached me. The child tilted her head. You promised to help. I do, he said, though a shadow passed across his face. But you must understand, there are dangers that seek to harm you for what you are. I cannot shield you completely unless you trust me. The child nodded, and the mother, seeing the child's courage, followed suit. Trust, however small, had been given. The king stepped outside with the letter now safely tucked into his cloak. The village seemed to lean closer, as if aware that the story unfolding would change the quiet forever. He walked among the misty streets, placing subtle protections, soft wards that only he could sense, around the houses. It was quiet magic, a shield of safety, not meant to be seen but to work nonetheless. The child watched him from the window, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and hope. He is protecting us, she whispered. The mother, leaning against the wall, sighed. I don't know who he really is, but perhaps we are not alone anymore. The king paused at the edge of the village, sensing the first stirrings of trouble. Shadows twisted unnaturally among the trees, and a cold wind whispered warnings that only he could hear. His lips pressed into a thin line. He had known that by stepping into the village, he had also invited attention, eyes that watched from far away, waiting for him to falter. Yet his focus remained on the child and her mother. The bond forming between them was fragile, yes, but it was a force far stronger than any fear he had known. Their trust was an anchor, holding him to something he had long forgotten: humanity. That evening the child ventured out again, leaving small offerings at the edge of the forest where the king had appeared. A carved wooden bird, a bundle of wildflowers, a small ribbon from her hair. She could not explain why she did it, only that she felt a presence watching, protecting, and in some mysterious way listening. The king noticed the gifts immediately. Each one carried her innocence, her small attempts to communicate her hope. He picked up a flower, examining it under the faint moonlight. A strange warmth spread through his chest, as though the simplest gestures could pierce centuries of darkness he had carried within him. The mother watched from the doorway, worry etched on her face. "You shouldn't go so far," she warned softly, yet even she could not resist the strange comfort the king had brought. "It is safe," the king said, appearing suddenly beside her, silent as shadow. "The forest watches over her as I do, trust me." The mother hesitated but nodded, realizing that the presence of the king had brought a calm that no words could. There was protection here and perhaps hope, but danger did not wait. Far beyond the village, in the twisting depths of the cursed woods, a figure observed. Hidden beneath a dark cloak, a stranger's eyes glowed with an unnatural light. The Alpha King's attention had been drawn to this village, to the child, and now the forces of darkness stirred in response. "He has found her," the stranger whispered, voice cold and cruel. "And soon the cost will come." The king's senses tensed. He felt the pulse of malevolence in the air, the presence of a power that sought to corrupt what was pure, yet he did not falter, not now. Not when the child's trust, so small and fragile, had ignited something he thought long dead within him. Night deepened over the village. The child and her mother sat by the fire, sharing a small meal, a rare moment of warmth in a world that often seemed merciless. The child glanced at the window repeatedly, as if expecting him to appear at any moment. And then he did. The king entered silently, kneeling once more beside the fire. He smelled of the forest, of smoke, and of distant storms, yet his eyes held only calm determination. "I have prepared," he said softly. "You will be safe here tonight, but tomorrow we must move carefully. Danger watches and it does not rest." The child's small hand reached for his and he paused. The touch was so fleeting, yet it carried the weight of trust, of hope, and of a connection he had not known he could feel. "You will not leave?" she asked, voice trembling. "I will not leave," he promised, "as long as I am needed." The mother, watching the exchange, felt a stir of something she had long thought impossible: relief, and perhaps even hope. The Alpha King, the figure of legend and shadow, had come not as a tyrant but as a protector. But the night was not without threat. Outside, shadows moved among the trees, whispering to one another, unseen eyes tracking every motion. A dark presence lingered, patient, waiting for the right moment. The king sensed it, the faint pressure at the edge of his awareness, the quiet pulse of something unnatural. He rose slowly, moving to the window. His amber eyes glowed, scanning the misty horizon. The forest itself seemed to shiver under his gaze, aware that a storm was approaching. "Tomorrow," he murmured, "we will face what comes, and I will not fail." The child, sleepy but unafraid now, yawned and curled beneath the blanket. The mother joined her, holding her close, both of them comforted by the silent presence of the Alpha King in the room. Yet outside, the wind carried a warning. The shadows were gathering. The forces that had watched for centuries, waiting for a moment of weakness, had noticed him, and their patience was endless. The king stood tall, a dark figure against the pale moonlight, ready to face the storm. For the first time in a long time, his heart was bound not by duty alone, but by something far more fragile, far more human: the trust of a child and the hope of a mother. And somewhere in the distance, unseen by all, the whisper of the dark stranger returned. "He comes for her, but can he protect what is already doomed?" The morning broke over the village like silver fire spilling across the rooftops. Mist curled around the edges of the streets, clinging to walls and fences like a living thing. The Alpha King stood at the edge of the village, his cloak heavy with dew, amber eyes scanning the horizon. The forest beyond held more than trees. It held whispers of danger, shadows that had been waiting for decades. The child, still small and trembling, watched from her window. Her mother stood behind her, hand resting lightly on her shoulder, a quiet strength in her eyes. The presence of the king had already changed their lives. Safety, for the first time in years, felt possible. Yet the mother sensed unease beneath the calmness that the king radiated. The king's senses were alert, attuned to the faintest shift in the forest, the smallest movement among the mist. The darkness that had watched them last night had not vanished, it had only waited. By midday he had moved through the village quietly, placing subtle wards and protections around the homes, the streets, even the school where children often gathered. These were small gestures to ordinary eyes, invisible to anyone but him, yet they carried power. The child could sense it. She wandered outside with a small basket of bread and wildflowers, leaving them in the courtyard near the edge of the forest. It was a gift, she thought, for the silent protector who had entered her life. The king noticed immediately. He emerged from the shadows, kneeling beside the offerings. His gloved fingers touched the bread and flowers lightly, as though afraid to break their fragile innocence. "You made these for me?" he asked, voice low, almost like a whisper of wind. The child nodded, cheeks flushed. I wanted to say thank you for helping us." The king's lips pressed into a thin line. He had spent centuries commanding armies, striking fear into hearts, yet the simple honesty of this child's gratitude made him pause. He had never known such pure, unguarded emotion. "You have courage," he said, "greater than many grown men I have known." The child tilted her head, unsure whether to believe him. Courage had never been something she thought she possessed, yet his words lingered, stirring a small spark inside her that she had not felt before. The mother, observing from a distance, felt something shift inside her as well. The king had saved them in ways she could not explain. He had not only provided for them, but he had brought with him a sense of protection, a promise of safety that felt more real than anything she had known. "You trust him," she said softly to herself, though doubt lingered. And yet, can anyone truly trust someone so powerful? Power was a dangerous thing. The king had it in abundance, yet he had chosen not to use it recklessly. He had chosen to protect, to wait, to listen. And in that choice, he had revealed a part of himself that few, if any, had ever seen. Evening descended slowly, bringing with it a shadowed hush that settled over the village. The Alpha King returned to the small house where the child and her mother waited. He moved silently, as if the very air obeyed him. Inside, the fire flickered, casting soft light across the room. The child handed him a small wooden carving, her hands trembling. "I made this for you," she said. He took it, turning it over in his hands. The wood was rough, carved unevenly, yet it carried a weight of love, of trust that no jewel or treasure could match. His chest tightened. He realized that the child had given him more than a gift. She had given him her faith, fragile and precious. "Thank you," he whispered, though the words felt too small for the feeling that rose within him. The mother looked at him, her eyes filled with something unspoken. Gratitude, yes, but also fear. Fear of what his presence could mean, of what the outside world might bring, and of the power that was both their shield and their unknown threat. Night deepened, and the forest stirred. The shadowy figure from before moved closer, hidden beneath a cloak of darkness. Its eyes glowed faintly, filled with malice and patience. The Alpha King sensed it immediately, a faint pulse, like the heartbeat of a predator stalking its prey. He rose from the fire, moving to the window. Amber eyes scanned the mist beyond the village. "They are coming," he murmured, voice heavy with foreboding. The child clutched the blanket, trembling. "Who?" she whispered. "The darkness," he replied, calm but steady. "There are those who seek to harm you for the very life you live. We must be careful." Her mother reached out, placing a hand over the child's. "Then we will be careful together," she said, though her voice wavered with uncertainty. In the dead of night, the king led the child and her mother to the edge of the forest. It was time to move them to safety, to places he had prepared beyond the village where no ordinary eyes could follow. He walked ahead, silent, every step measured, every shadow noted. The child followed closely, curiosity mingled with fear. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. "Somewhere you will be safe," he replied, "but you must walk quietly and trust me completely." The mother followed, holding the child's hand tightly. She felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. The king's presence was overwhelming, yet comforting. It was as if the darkness around him was alive, but it did not threaten them. It protected them. As they moved through the forest, the shadows seemed to twist unnaturally, whispering and curling around the trees. The king's senses were sharp, detecting the faintest signs of danger. Every rustle, every movement was observed. Suddenly, a low voice hissed from the trees. "He comes for her, but will he succeed?" The king's hand went to the hilt of a sword at his side. Amber eyes glowed brighter as he scanned the darkness. He did not falter. He would protect them no matter the cost. The child clutched his cloak instinctively. "I'm scared," she admitted softly. "You have no reason to fear while I am here," he said, voice calm, unwavering. "I will not let anything harm you." The mother's heart tightened at the words. She had seen fear and cruelty before, yet she had never known a presence so powerful and yet so tender. She realized then that the king's strength was not in his power alone. It was in his choice to protect, to care, to stand against the shadows when all else trembled. They reached a hidden grove deep within the forest, a place where sunlight barely touched the ground, yet where faint magic lingered in the air. The king knelt, placing a protective circle of faintly glowing wards around them. The magic pulsed softly, a shield woven of light and shadow capable of keeping intruders at bay. "You are safe here," he said, standing again. "But only until dawn. Then we must move further. The darkness is patient and it waits." The child hugged herself, eyes wide. You will not leave." "I will not leave," he promised again, and this time the words carried the weight of an unbreakable vow. The mother placed a hand over her heart. "Then we will trust you," she said softly, "because what else can we do?" Night fell fully, and the forest around them hummed with quiet tension. Every tree seemed to listen, every shadow seemed alive. Yet the king remained vigilant, standing watch as the child slept against her mother. He did not allow his mind to wander, though his heart betrayed him with thoughts of the innocence he had come to cherish. He thought of his centuries of isolation, of the power he had wielded over kingdoms and beasts, and realized for the first time that there was something stronger than fear, stronger than control. Love born of trust, fragile and small, yet capable of breaking through centuries of darkness. And yet the threat remained. The shadowy figure that had watched from the edge of the forest had moved closer, gathering unseen forces. It would not wait forever, and it would not fail. The king's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his sword, his senses sharpened, ready for whatever came. He knew that tomorrow would test him in ways he had not faced for decades, but he would not falter, not while the child and her mother depended on him. The child in her sleep murmured a soft word. "Thank you," the king's eyes softened. "No, thank you," he whispered. "You have reminded me what it means to be human again." The forest was quiet, yet alive with tension. The mist curled like smoke among the trees, hiding movements and whispers that no ordinary eyes could see. The Alpha King stood in the hidden grove, his cloak brushing the damp ground, amber eyes glowing as he scanned the shadows. His senses were sharp, every sound and smell registered in his mind. The darkness that had been stalking them had grown bolder overnight. The child stirred in her mother's arms, half asleep, sensing the unease around them. "Is it time?" she whispered. "Yes," the king replied softly, kneeling beside them. "But you must remain calm. Do not speak unless I ask. Trust me completely." The mother's grip tightened around her daughter, her heart pounding. She had learned to trust the king, yes, but fear lingered. The shadows that moved through the forest were patient and cruel. They would not give mercy to anyone, especially not those who had dared to seek protection from the Alpha King. The first sign of danger came as a rustle in the trees, subtle at first, almost imperceptible. The king's gaze narrowed. His hand went to the hilt of his sword, and a low hum of magic thrummed around him, a protective aura that cloaked the child and her mother. "They are near," he murmured. "Stay close." The child nestled against her mother, trembling. "I don't want to be afraid," she said softly. "You need not be," the king replied, voice calm but firm. "I will not let anything harm you." From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall and cloaked, eyes glowing faintly with unnatural light. The Alpha King's amber eyes met the intruder's, and a cold wind swept through the grove, bending the trees and stirring the mist. "You dare touch what is not yours," the shadow hissed, voice like the scrape of stone against stone. "The child belongs to no one, yet here you are guarding her." The king stepped forward, moving between the shadow and the mother and child. "I will protect her," he said, each word heavy with power and determination. "You will not touch them." A laugh, low and cruel, echoed through the forest. "Power alone cannot save you," the shadow said. "The girl's innocence is a trap, and you are bound by chains you cannot break." The king's amber eyes glowed brighter, the aura around him expanding. "I am bound by nothing that matters now," he said. "The chains of my past, my curse, are broken by what is here, by trust, by hope, by the courage of this child and her mother." The shadow attacked. Movement was sudden, faster than the eye could follow, but the king was ready. His sword flashed like lightning, cutting through the darkness with precision and strength. Magic and shadow collided, sparks of light and dark scattering across the grove. The child cried out, clutching her mother, but the king moved to shield them. He was a figure of unstoppable force, yet his eyes never left the child. Every swing of his blade, every pulse of his magic was calculated, controlled, not for victory alone, but for protection. The shadow hissed again, retreating slightly, realizing the king's resolve was stronger than it had imagined. "This is not over," it whispered, melting back into the darkness. The king did not move from his position, still alert, still prepared for a second strike. His chest heaved slightly from the effort, yet he felt something else rising within him, a warmth, a sense of life he had long thought lost. The courage of the child, the bravery of her mother, had ignited something deep inside him. The mother looked at him, her fear mingling with awe. You saved us," she said softly, her voice breaking. "All of this for us." The king knelt beside her, placing a hand lightly over hers. "Not for you alone," he said. "For me as well, for what I have lost and forgotten. For what I can still protect." The child crawled into his lap, eyes wide. You will always protect us." "I will always protect you," he whispered, voice soft yet unwavering. "No matter what comes." There was a long silence, broken only by the distant wind and the soft rustle of the trees. For the first time in decades, the king felt a sense of peace, a moment where the weight of his past, his curses, and his isolation seemed to lift, if only slightly. Dawn broke slowly over the forest, painting everything in soft gold. The shadows had vanished, at least for now, retreating to the corners from which they had come. The king lowered his sword, exhaling slowly, but his mind remained alert. He knew the threat had not ended, darkness was patient and it would return. Yet he also knew something else now. Hope was a force stronger than fear. Trust, pure and fragile, had broken through the walls of his heart. And for the first time, he understood that power was not only in strength or magic, it was in the courage to protect, to love, and to be vulnerable without fear. The mother gathered her daughter in her arms, tears slipping down her face. I never believed we could be safe," she said, voice shaking. "But with you we are." The child smiled, small and tired, yet full of a quiet light. "Thank you," she whispered again, leaning against the king. "Thank you for helping us." He looked at them, a faint smile on his lips, amber eyes warm. "No, thank you," he said. "You have reminded me of something I thought I had lost. You have reminded me of life, of trust, and of what it means to be human." The day passed quietly in the hidden grove. The king created a small sanctuary for the mother and child, wards and barriers that would keep them safe, even if he needed to leave briefly to confront other dangers. He taught the child small lessons in courage, not with swords or magic, but with stories, patience, and gentle guidance. The mother, too, learned. She found strength in herself, encouraged by the king's presence, by the quiet lessons of resilience and hope. Together, the three formed a bond, fragile yet unbreakable, a triangle of trust, courage, and love that no shadow could fully touch. Evening came, and with it a calm unlike any they had known. The Alpha King stood at the edge of the grove, watching the sun sink behind the trees. He thought of the shadows that lurked in the corners of the world, the enemies that waited, and the battles yet to come. But he also thought of the child's smile, her small acts of bravery, and her mother's quiet determination. For the first time, he felt certain that he could face whatever came, not because of his strength alone, but because he was no longer alone. The wind stirred, carrying a whisper from the forest. The shadow from before had retreated, but it had left a final message. The child is safe for now, but all hope fades eventually. The king's amber eyes glowed. He did not flinch. "Hope does not fade," he said aloud, voice firm. "Not while courage lives in the hearts of the innocent, and not while love remains unbroken." He returned to the sanctuary, kneeling beside the mother and child. The little one clutched his cloak, tired but unafraid. The mother sat quietly, tears in her eyes, a mixture of relief and newfound hope etched across her face. "Rest now," he said gently. "Tomorrow we will continue our journey. The world outside is full of shadows, yes, but also light, and we will walk together." The child leaned against him, breathing slowly. "I feel safe," she murmured. "And you are safe," he said, voice low, yet carrying the weight of promise. "No darkness, no curse, no shadow can take that from you." Night settled over the grove, but it was no longer a night of fear. It was a night of quiet strength, of bonds formed and courage tested, of redemption slowly weaving through the threads of their lives. The king watched over them, knowing that challenges would come again. Yet for the first time in centuries, he felt something he had long forgotten: hope, trust, and the gentle warmth of a heart unbroken. And somewhere beyond the forest, the world waited, full of shadows and secrets. But the Alpha King, the child, and her mother were ready. Together they would face the coming darkness. Together they would endure. Together they had begun to transform not just their lives, but the world around them. The letter that had started it all, written by the small hand of a child desperate for help, had awakened something ancient and powerful. It had reached the heart of a king, broken centuries of isolation, and ignited a chain of hope that no shadow could fully extinguish. The forest held its breath, the stars shimmered like distant promises, and the Alpha King whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning, but we will survive. Together."